with dollar incentives, they should be short-term tools. If you want to really build a culture of long-term retention, you need to focus on building your people up, empowering your people, and giving them the autonomy and the responsibility that they're very capable of managing on their own.
Welcome to the Thrive Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Potter, and we're dedicated to guiding tech founders and entrepreneurs along the path to success. So let's get started and dive into today's blueprint for success. Today I have with me Kevin Peterson, the Chief Operating Officer of DataCapable, and Scott Potter, the CTO of Thrive Advisors. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Kevin, the war for talent in the tech industry is relentless. Can you describe the modern challenges in attracting and retaining top talent?
Yeah, that's a big that's a big ask. The modern challenges are varied, and they vary from spot to spot. But I think the biggest challenge that we face is that traditional compensation is no longer enough to attract talent. And if we rely solely on getting into a battle of cash flow and how much you can push to people, that's not a strategy that is going to create long-term retention in your company. And B, ultimately, your employees are going to be left unsatisfied with that. So you really need to be thinking about attracting talent from a much broader perspective. Yes, you have to have good benefits. Yes, you have to have competitive salaries. Yes, you have to have competitive incentives from a monetary perspective, but that's baseline now. Everybody's doing that. So to differentiate yourself in the market of talent, it has to be much more than that. It has to be a culture that people want to work and thrive in. It has to be a mission that they can get behind. The younger generation coming up, they view money as something that they can go get anywhere, and it really is. If you're talented, that's a truth. So what else about this organization is pulling me in? Is there a mission I can get behind? Is there a culture? Is there flexibility in working? Is this an organization that's going to provide opportunity to me? Is this an organization that is going to invest in me as an employee of the organization? And I don't think you can any longer say we're investing in an employee to make them a better employee for the organization. I think you have to put the lens on it that you're making them a more valuable asset, regardless of whether it's an asset that you are going to keep forever and that you're going to get benefits from a retention perspective and from a productivity perspective for investing in that. So it's a much more complex, I guess if I'm boiling it down, it's a much more complex picture than it was, 25 years ago. And then, we have one of the big things that's changed that we haven't recognized from a retention perspective is that the days of pensions are gone. People have mobility, and they, your 401k goes with you. So that pension plan that kept employees retained for 30, 40 plus years because they get to continue to collect a paycheck, that incentive's gone as well.
All excellent points. I agree with you completely. My experience has been, in my prior company, I was responsible for interviewing everyone. I was typically the final interview. So the candidates were well vetted and very much pre-qualified and were somewhat enrolled. And they had many of the questions answered. But when it came to me, I wanted to make sure that it was not only a good fit for the company, it was a good fit for the individual. And you talk about, in previous episodes, we've talked about client feedback. Well, prospective employee feedback is the same thing. And so I would start out by asking if they had any questions. And I could judge a lot, not only were they prepared to ask good questions, but the quality of those questions showed their interest level and whatnot. But it was the answers to those, I mean, it was the questions themselves that really was thought-provoking for me, because, as you said, the younger generation, the millennials and whatnot, and the Gen Zers wanted to know what the mission of the company was. And not the mission as most mission statements. Did we have a spirit to give back, to make a societal impact? And, with us being able to save lives through proactive communications, that was meaningful to many of them. So, no, I get that the process of compensation really is secondary to the culture, the team atmosphere. Also, post-COVID, there is a desire to have incredible flexibility, because when you're remote, yes, you can take care of whatever you need to take care of, but still get the job done. And so they want to know that flexibility is there. And the other thing that I found is early on, when we were, this tech startup, being able to source talent, and this is one of the questions I have, additional follow-up questions for you. When you're just starting out, you have no reputation as an employer, and you're trying to attract top talent. What advice would you give to a tech startup that's looking to attract the best minds out there that differentiate themselves from more well-established competitors?
Yeah, it's a challenge for sure. But I think what the tech startup industry on whole has done is that they've done a good job of recognizing that they can't compete with the tech giants from building out this fantastic workplace environment that millions of dollars is invested in. That's not the place you're in your business from day one. But what you can offer is you can offer more autonomy. You can offer more opportunity, because in theory, you're building a business at a very rapid pace, and that opportunity will present itself as an outcome of the business getting larger. So I think you have to think about the problem differently. I think you have to leverage your network. That's one of the places you have to go to first. And if you don't have a network, figure out how to build a network, because those are ultimately going to be your connections into that talent that you're not going to be able to cut through the noise that's out there in trying to get to them without finding a new conduit to them. So, I think you just have to think about it differently, and you have to think about what you're offering differently. Just building off your point you were saying about the interview process, I oversee most of our hiring as well. And one of the things that I changed very early on in our interview process was I flipped the script on the interview process. You usually start out an interview asking questions of the individual, getting to know the individual. I have taken that script and said, no, we're going to start this out by educating you on our business, because it's critically important to us that you understand what this is, what we are, and how we operate. And while we have a decision to make on you, your decision on us is just as important. So yeah. I spend the first half hour of every interview educating them, ask what they understand about the business. You know how much research they did right off the bat, but you also know, like, their perception of the business is just what's publicly available.
Right.
So we start our interview process with, here is our business, here is our mission, here is how we operate. We're not sugarcoating anything, because we want you to make an informed decision about what it's like to be at this company. Because if you don't feel like you fit our culture, there's not long-term retention that's going to come out of this hire.
Well, let's speak about long-term retention. You've been very successful at retaining your employees. You have very low turnover as a result of that, correct?
Correct.
Oh, that's great. One of the other things that I found was early on, we didn't understand the importance of having a great recruiter. We used the job boards, and then we got as you would expect, hundreds of resumes that we had to filter through. And it was really a chore to try to find talent because, first of all, the basic rule is talent will find a job very quickly. So you can't afford to take a month to sift through those while you're managing the business. And so we even used outside recruiters, which wasn't always the best option. But then we happened upon, much later in our corporate history, probably the best recruiter that I've ever worked with. And she's much more than a recruiter. She's a finder of talent. And so by the time she would bring somebody into our organization to begin the process, this person was already top-notch. And then taking them through the process of educating them as you've taken time to do, the candidate's already well familiar with our operation. And so that has just not only accelerated, the acceleration of growth is because we're bringing in great talent, but it was the retention of that because the culture was already at a peak that was compatible with these candidates. Scott, every sector has distinct challenges, but how does HR differ from, say, in a tech setting from, say, finance or healthcare?
Yeah, a great question. Specifically in the tech sector, and Kevin's very familiar with this too. It's always an environment of constant change, constant innovation, and from a tech perspective, it feels like you master something today and it changes tomorrow. So, from an HR perspective, some of the distinct challenges are offering to people coming into the organization an environment where they can continue that growth and creating education programs, continued education, fostering a culture where there's knowledge sharing between senior individuals to junior individuals. So, while finance and healthcare have their own challenges, I'm sure, tech specifically is just always dealing with, in a positive way, the constant changing nature of innovation and needing to stay in front of that by way of creating that, continuous education for everyone.
You have a unique opportunity in your career experience that you've worked for a large financial institution. Mm-hmm. And you've also worked at a tech startup. So, clearly you have that real world experience. In terms of a tech startup, what I've found is that the pace of change is exciting. Mm-hmm. And it attracts a certain kind of talent that the more traditional, 9 to 5 in the office, managing the technology is so different than that in a finance organization. That's not really the mission of the financial institution. It is to maintain operations, to have security and things of that nature. But in a tech startup, you can have, in a very small organization, a great deal of impact, and it changes very quickly. Is that what you experienced?
Yeah, absolutely. And certainly with, startups too, you're working generally with smaller teams, right? Which, it's going to be much more nimble and people wearing a lot of different hats. Whereas in larger organizations, as you said, you're kind of more focused on status quo with operations and just making sure everything runs smoothly. So yeah, definitely, there's definitely a major difference between how, talent is brought into a smaller organization versus maybe a healthcare, large hospital, and how they handle onboarding and things of that nature.
Yeah, I think one of the, I don't know, I ended up down in rabbit holes in my own mm-hmm. head from time to time, but when I think about the tech startup and the culture that is of the tech startup, it's very hard charging, mm-hmm. it's very rapid change, and there's a certain type of person that operates in that world. But right. I think the thing that we occasionally forget about is the people who thrive in a world of rapid change and innovation. They also hold those same expectations for themselves. Mm-hmm. So if the change is happening all around them, but the change isn't happening for them, and you aren't meeting their expectations of advancement, of opportunity, that comes with the expectation of change, ultimately you're not going to be able to retain them long term.
Right.
Kevin, company's culture is its compass. Can you elaborate on the importance of cultural fit when recruiting high-tech talent?
It's paramount. It's paramount. Again, that's why I start the process with educating them on who we are, because I no matter how many questions I ask, no matter how much time I spend with them, the interview is still the surface level. Like, I don't care how skilled of an interviewer you are, if they are skilled at presenting an image, you're bound to get fooled, right? And if you've done enough hiring, you've been fooled. And I pride myself on being a good judge of character and being able to understand people early in the process. But I also recognize that I'm not perfect at that, and I'm going to fail at it. So I want to empower that person who is potentially going to get that job offer to make the same decision and apply the same analysis that I'm trying to apply against them, to have them apply it against our organization. And one of the things that we get into this process, okay, we've made an offer and now we're negotiating. If the person doesn't feel like they want to be here, it doesn't matter what I offer them to be here, right? So I need them to make that decision, and I'm very transparent about that. Like, this is as much my decision when we get here as it is your decision, and you're empowered to make that decision. But that's also setting the groundwork for what it's going to be like to work in this organization by empowering them with that decision from day one.
Well, that's an excellent point. One of the things that I've started to experience over the last, I'd say, 10 years is the role of the importance of inclusiveness and personal growth, not just professional growth. And so the top candidates that I've had the opportunity to interview, they really hold me accountable to that. And my technique for convincing them that this is the right place for them is I encourage them. It's not the traditional interview process where I'm asking questions and they're giving answers. I said, you really should speak to the person that is in the department and see, that we actually live what we discuss. And that's been in terms of getting them to say yes and to experience that those issues that are important to them. Just bringing in a team of people, exposing them, encouraging them to talk to everyone and anyone that they want to talk to. We're an open book, and that has really been significant. Have you found the same thing to be true at DataCapable?
Yes, absolutely. Like, if you want to have a transparent organization, needs to be transparent from day one, right? Yeah. Duh.
Yes.
Duh. Right. But the other real value in that I think isn't always recognized is by opening that process up, you're also building acumen and knowledge in your team. You're also building rapport before a job offer is even extended. And that's growth for your internal employees when they get to be part of that process, particularly, your frontline employees. They have buy-in to that process now, and they're already positioned to assimilate that person quicker because they were part of the process. They felt like they had influence over the process, and the first 30 days after you make a hire is the biggest indicator of retention, long-term retention for an employee. If you do that first 30 days well, statistically speaking, you're going to have way better retention.
Yeah, you bring up a great point that it's a process of acclimation for that employee, and it's so important to have a well thought out 30-day plan for the company to help that employee start. Scott, as the millennial at the table. Can you share with us, obviously you share conversations and collaboration with people, with professionals in your, in the technology side of what you're focused on. What's important to them? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, I think it depends on their role in the organization too, but I feel like millennial aside, we all share similar concerns and struggles as we progress through our different stages of our careers. But I think especially in the tech space, a topic that usually comes up is employee burnout, or it's just we were talking about the pace of innovation a little earlier, and it's really just what needs to happen. And what I've seen work is more flexibility with work schedules. We all kind of redefined what that means post-COVID, working remotely, and instead of working less, we're all working a heck of a lot more. It seems like we're always, your office is right there, right? But in terms of, addressing things like burnout, it's constantly checking in the management team with the employees, making sure that doing frequent temperature checks to see how things are going, not just professionally but personally as well, especially post-COVID and the different types of work environments that we're in now, and just fostering a culture of really just flexibility and open communication.
Right. Kevin, as technology rapidly evolves, how are HR strategies adapting to ensure continuous learning and, most importantly, upskilling opportunities?
Yeah, I think traditionally this has been the side of the desk for somebody. It's the side of the desk for the manager. It's the side of the desk for HR. And it has been viewed as a benefit to your employees, and I don't think presenting it as a benefit to the employees is the right strategy. This is good business first. This is going to have a clear return on investment from a retention perspective, from a productivity perspective, and if you take that as your initial perception of why you're investing in these programs, ultimately it will be part of your culture. It will be part of who you are. It will be an expectation. It won't be we have to do this or we need to do this. No, this is who we are. This is how we do business, and we do business this way because it's good business. They're happy employees, satisfied employees are your most productive employees.
Right. Well, one of the things that we've done is, in addition to just formal training, we try to mix up the employees to the project so they get cross-functional training. So they not only feel a part of the organization in terms of, I didn't know that was a key driver of success for us, because if they were just on one type of project doing one thing, they wouldn't get that cross-functional training. And I'm sure you've experienced that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. If I can just
sure.
build off that point really quickly, the risk of not doing that is you don't really know what your own company culture is, and what you really have is subcultures within your company. Because if you have good, effective managers, they're managing and building their own culture in their organization. If they're not connected to the rest of the org, the risk is you have all of these different subcultures. And while that might work and might be okay if you have exceptional managers in every role, the reality is if they're off in a silo building their own culture, there are going to be elements of that culture that don't align with your own culture.
Absolutely.
Good point.
Scott, you earlier you mentioned about burnout. And so, employee well-being is clearly paramount. And with the pressures in tech, how are companies innovatively addressing potential burnout?
Yeah, I mean, I think I mean, in terms of innovation, I feel like it's more of just, building relationships with the management team to all of the members of that team. And, I don't want to over innovate that process. I think it really just comes down to, I think one thing I've noticed work really well is one-on-ones, and doing those very frequently. There's a time and a place for, the group to get together and voice opinions kind of in a larger format, but one-on-ones I've found really kind of gives you a feel of how the person is doing, either struggling or succeeding in projects, how they're fitting well into the company culture, and it really kind of gives you a deeper feel when you can engage on those one-on-ones. And then it also, I think, as you get a sense of how people are doing via those one-on-ones, you can get a sense of their level of burnout and if things need to be tuned, whether it's more flexible work hours, time off, mental health days, if you will. So it's really just making sure that you're in tune with your team and frequent checkpoints.
Yeah, I agree that flexible work hours, as you said, mental health days, we would bring in experts for just wellness workshops.
Yep.
And so, I'm glad you brought up those points. Kevin?
If I could just build off from this and apply a little of my perspective here. The first key here is expectation management. If you aren't managing the expectations, you're driving people to the burnout. And to that point, one of the things that work-life balance has been a dead horse that's been beaten and beaten and beaten, and it's one that I don't subscribe to, because I think it's setting the wrong expectation that you aren't going to meet that expectation. For one, work-life balance means something different to everybody. Mm-hmm. So what is work-life balance for me is probably not work-life balance for Bill or work-life balance for you. So I talk about what does it mean to manage life and work on whole, right? So it's not there's no longer this dichotomy. Technology has taken that away. You are always on. We live in an always on world. Mm-hmm. And the piece to managing that well, though, is empowering your employees to know that they can turn it off. And I am at fault. I've been at fault many times. I have a thought in the middle of the night. I've tried to get better. Like, they've made tools for scheduling messages, but I know I drop stuff on people all of the time. But I also try to make clear and reinforce over and over and over again that just because I don't have the life balance that you need or want, you are empowered to not answer me. It doesn't matter what my role is in the organization. If it's urgent, I will make sure you know it's urgent. If it's not urgent, leave it. Step away from it. My expectation is not that I'm going to get a Slack message back or an email back at 3 a.m. This was a thought that I didn't want to lose. This was something that I wanted to make sure that you had insight into. But that doesn't mean that my expectation is you are matching my level of energy, my level of chaos, I guess, in the matter.
Yeah, one thing that I've seen some teams implement is kind of these mandatory no work weekends and to really unplug, because like you said, everyone's wired a little bit differently. And even though it's a formal holiday or weekend, most people, myself included, don't actually unplug, and you're not getting that reset that you need to be productive going into the next week. And so, sometimes implementing no work weekends or temporarily removing access so you're not tempted to open Slack when it's off hours. It's sometimes it's needed. So.
Yeah.
Well, I think your point that within the tech industry, there's really a diverse group of personalities, and a lot of them are A-type personalities where they're just driven. And one of the techniques that we use to avoid burnout was we had very traditional 2 or 3 week, depending on tenure, time off, and then we gave so many days of sick days. And what we noticed is no one would take sick days because they didn't want to, they wanted to use them when they needed them, and so they would really avoid doing that. So then we went to, everybody just gets this amount of time off, and we didn't make a distinction between time off and sick days. And then we were challenged, and it was terrifying to even think of it, of unlimited vacation time. Mm-hmm. We go, well, if we give unlimited vacation time, there's nobody going to be around to do any work. That's not true. But what it did was they stopped counting. And they had a sense of, because of the company culture, they had a sense of responsibility. But it took all the pressure off them to worry about how many days left do I have, and I might need vacation time for sick time. It was just a bunch of nonsense that led up to giving unlimited paid time off, and it's actually very self-regulating. And we tracked it very carefully, and it wasn't that more time was being taken off, it's that the employees relaxed and took time off when they needed to take time off. And that really helped us avoid burnout.
Yeah, and it's counterintuitive to traditional
as an
business
entrepreneur,
knowledge.
It scares you.
Yeah, absolutely. And it builds commitment by you committing to them, by you entrusting them, by you empowering them. That is playing on the psychology of that individual. Not we're trying to play games, but they see you trusting them, you investing in them. That's a reciprocal relationship. That builds trust in you, and they want to invest in you and your business. And that intrinsic motivation is something that you're never going to drive with money, with dollars, with incentives. With dollar incentives, they should be short-term tools. If you want to really build a culture of long-term retention, you need to focus on building your people up, empowering your people, and giving them the autonomy and the responsibility that they're very capable of managing on their own.
Scott, diversity and inclusion have become pivotal. How are tech firms ensuring these values are deeply rooted in HR procedures and practices?
Yeah, it's a great question. And in the tech space, it's predominantly a male-driven space. And what I've seen with specific teams that we've helped develop is opening up that pool to with recruiting efforts to make sure we get a wide variety of experience from all backgrounds. And I think the end product and outcome of opening that spectrum of available talent results in a more thoughtful team with a lot of different backgrounds and perspectives that either develop better products or better customer support when you have people that bring different perspectives to the table and experiences.
So this is an area that I'm always very cautious on how I wander into it and how I step into it, because I'm acutely aware that I am viewed as the antithesis to DEI. And this is one of the places where I think it's critically important to look at yourself first and understand your own bias and your own limitations. Mm-hmm. And this is one of those places where I know I can't have an objective view on the subject no matter how hard I try. So this is one of the clear places in the organization where you have an opportunity to leverage outside experts to help you ensure that your own bias aren't built into your perception of what DEI is, how you're trying to create that environment, because we're humans and we all have internal bias. Mm-hmm. And if we try to ignore those bias and we try to create this culture of inclusivity, and that sits with us as individuals in the organization. For starters, you're trying to run up a really tall, steep hill to do this, because you're already swimming against the current. When if it's me that's doing it, I'm swimming against the current, and you can instantly lose all credibility on the subject if you're the one holding this torch. So choose carefully about how you handle this subject, and who in the organization is driving it. I view my role in this is to support it, to make sure that it is core to the organization, but I am not the one designing DEI programs or trying to execute DEI programs, because I don't have credibility on the subject.
I'm not a fan of having diversity for diversity's sake. I want to, as an entrepreneur, as a startup tech entrepreneur, it really requires you to hire the best talent. And, it's interesting when DEI became, a requirement. I look back at our employees, and we had full DEI in our workforce. And it was, perhaps we were fortunate, perhaps we were lucky. But my single criteria is hire the best talent that is available. And when you look at our diverse workforce, from gender to culture to all the things that are required and considered in DEI, we were already living it 20 years ago, because we simply wanted to hire the best. And as it turned out, the best was completely diversified and inclusive. So it was, sometimes when you're doing the right thing, even the long-term right thing of DEI is achieved.
Yeah, for sure. And I think, like, when we think about and talk about talent acquisition and hiring the most talented people, I think we have to be very careful about how we're defining talent, because there are implicit bias in what is talent. And if you have a very narrow focus of what talent is, you will have a very narrow focus of talent. And we just talked about how important diversity is to your talent base.
It's key.
So we need to make sure that we're not just looking at traditional metrics of talent when we're assessing talent. We need to recognize that talent comes in a lot of different shapes and forms.
It absolutely does. And I'm so proud of the staff that we put together, because from nationalities all across the world, all different types, from gender to gender preference and all that. The culture that we had was one of inclusivity, and it wasn't designed to be any one way. It's just that when you attract the talent, the innovation that comes from that and the collaboration was just awe-inspiring, because it really does take that village to create a company that is leading edge and innovative. Kevin, to shift to remote work, it's well, for our company, it was monumental. We had always been, always in the office, and our talent pool was limited to that geographic commuting area. But how are HR strategies adjusting to maintain that team cohesion and company culture in this new virtual world? One of the things that impressed me was DataCapable from its inception was remote. How did you achieve that cohesion?
Yeah, you have to take different approaches. You have to think about problems differently. If you're thinking about the same problems the same way you always did, you're likely to have a suboptimal outcome. So, and it's been a learning experience for me. It's been a new adventure for me. I grew up in a traditional office. I mean, I spent 15 years of my career working inside of a utility. It doesn't get much more traditional and structured than the utility environment. So for me, it was a new challenge, but I instantly realized I need to think about things differently. I need to implement new strategies. I need to have a lot more focus and energy put towards something that built itself organically with water cooler talk and people interacting in the office. So you have to be much more deliberate, and you have to be much more focused, and you have to make sure you're applying energy to it, because it's less organic in that case. Like, for example, one of the things that we do at DataCapable is we have a Monday stand-up, and we don't talk about business at all on our Monday stand-up. We always have a question that everybody has to ask. Last Monday's was, what is the one hobby or one skill that outside of work that you could learn? And it was a fantastic question, because I'm sitting here scribbling down notes, like, these are all these people's interest. And if I want to think about motivating and incentivizing, you guys just built me a list to know how I can help motivate and incentivize you.
That's brilliant.
But it also builds this level of team cohesion. You know something about the person that you might have got at that Monday morning conversation at the coffee maker or the water cooler. So we intentionally put that in place. And then, the second question we always ask is, how was your weekend?
Mm-hmm.
What did you do over your weekend? So, we have weekends where we were working support all weekend. It hasn't been a great one, but we also learn about the interest. Everybody learns about the interest of the people, what they do in their spare time, what they have going on in their lives.
Right.
That was an element that was organically there in the office. And in a remote environment, those opportunities don't present themselves. So you have to create those.
Yeah, I guess one word I'd describe that as is intentionality.
Yeah.
It's so easy to become disconnected when you're remote. But to create that Monday morning stand-up, and with that intentionality of really fostering that type of collaboration, communication, that's brilliant. Good. Scott, open dialogue is crucial for growth. So how are tech companies fostering channels for, that candid feedback between staff and leadership?
Yeah, I mean, we touched on it a little bit earlier, but I think the one thing that stands out to me the most, and it has been present in my career as well, is really just striking that importance of one-on-ones. I can't emphasize that enough with as teams grow, and especially touching on your points about remote work and people not having that, hey, let me walk down to your office and sit down with you, which is important if you are back in the office. But really, it's not something that can happen annually during a performance review. It needs to happen ideally on a weekly basis, where you're fostering that trust and relationship amongst the leadership team and with the folks in the company to feel like they can have an open door policy where they can come in, express concerns, and not feel like they're going to get in trouble for saying the wrong thing or anything like that.
Well, what you're hitting on is a culture of safety.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't have a culture of safety, and you take feedback and do the wrong things with that feedback once you received it, that's the closest way to close down that feedback loop. Because if I feel like speaking my mind is going to get me in trouble, guess what? I'm not going to speak my mind. I don't care how you ask me, what tactic you go about to ask me. I don't care if you anonymize it and put it in a survey. If I believe there are negative repercussions for raising concerns, I'm not raising concerns.
Gone, yeah. Good point.
And that is I believe that's true for every individual that works in your organization. So you have to start with that culture of safety, empowering your people, letting your people know that you're asking the questions for the right reasons, and you're going to do the right thing with the information.
Absolutely, great point. Gentlemen, Yeah, Kevin, Scott, I could go on for another hour.
Easy.
But we've run out of time. And so I want to thank everyone for tuning into the Thrive podcast. If this episode has been of value to your journey, please share, subscribe, leave us a review. And for all the tech founders and entrepreneurs out there, I encourage you to visit our website. That's thriveadvisors.com. And remember, most businesses hit a phase of stagnation, but Thrive Advisors is here to build the right strategy for you, set it in motion, and steer your venture to success and a profitable exit. So until next time, thank you for joining us.